Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak with the dear guests regarding the recent arrests. Mehdi Nasiri, a political activist, is with me in this section of News Podcast. Greetings to you, Mr. Nasiri. Thank you for accepting our invitation. If we consider these arrests as a sign, what do you think it indicates about the current phase of the Islamic Republic regime's life? Is it a sign of security crisis and collapse, or the beginning of a controlled transformation? I send greetings to my media colleagues and the beloved people of Iran. As I believe this is the first conversation I am having with you after this Iranian Holocaust, I want to take a moment to pay my respects to all the families of those affected and to tell them that alongside the heavy sorrow and grief they bear, which we all share, the lives of their loved ones were sacrificed for a very noble cause, to save Iran, to save the people of Iran, to save a civilization. They can be assured that in the days following our victory, ceremonies of mourning and commemoration for these dear ones will be held in a manner befitting their dignity and greatness. In response to your question, I would say that we need to analyze these arrests on two levels. The first level is that I consider this to be a survival tactic. Now, it can no longer be called a strategy because the regime's activities and such movements are tactical in nature. Survival tactics aimed at extending their existence by a month, 3 months, even not reaching a year. There is that famous proverb about someone drowning in a raging river who clings to any plant for salvation, clutches at straws, as we say. That's the situation of the Islamic Republic. Even the brutal massacre ordered by Khamenei can be read in this context. It was a sign of Khamenei's panic and desperation. Otherwise, no regime, even a dictatorship or a totalitarian one, would resort to such mass killings if it wanted to act without panic. Of course, the release of a known reformist, Mr. Shakuri Rad's audio recording, in my opinion, could be one of the factors behind these arrests. There were 2 or 3 dark points in this audio recording that I will address later in the discussion, but I won't go into that now. However, Mr. Shakuri Rad stated that the regime itself was responsible for this massacre, that the regime was the cause of the destruction, and this undermined the official narrative of the regime, of Khamenei, and the security apparatus. This naturally angered the regime, Khamenei and the security agencies, and it was not without repercussions. Later, we saw that Mr. Shakuri Rad himself was among those arrested. But we can also conceive of and analyze a second layer for this action. The actors and security agencies may be aware that such arrests, which will certainly be reported inside Iran and may have repercussions overseas, can divert attention from the tragedy of the massacres, while everyone is still in shock. This could serve to distract both domestic and international public opinion from this disaster. Another function could be to divert public opinion away from the national consensus that has emerged regarding the recognition of the Crown Prince in Iran. I think this could also be one of the functions of these actions. Now, some of these security agencies, with their evil mindset, may have thought that with such actions at this juncture, they would create an alternative for the future of Iran. This is my broad view of this matter. Mr. Nasiri, these reformists are known as the safety valve of the regime. This expression has been used about them for a long time, especially after Mohammad Khatami's presidency. What has happened now that some of them are accused of subversive actions by the security agencies? It can be rightly said that some reformists do not mind a change of regime, but their intention is to see Khamenei go and to replace him with a more congenial supreme leader for the endurance of the 1979 revolution. Their concern is to maintain power within the framework of the 1979 discourse. Their issue is not to transcend this disgraceful and horrific revolution and to build a new Iran. You see, From this perspective, Khamenei's overthrow is not agreeable to the security agencies, which are firmly loyal to Khamenei. They see this as an imminent threat. Of course, after Khamenei's fall, it is not unlikely that these agencies could follow such a line. Maybe we can discuss later how effective such movements can really be. As you referred to Mr. Shakurirad's published remarks, in his proposed solution, he mentioned that delegating authority from Ali Khamenei to Masoud Pezeshkian could manage this crisis for the Islamic Republic under current conditions. Perhaps this aligns with your earlier remarks? Yes, exactly. Their plan is to take power from Khamenei and hand it over to Pezeshkian, as he is somewhat aligned with them and is one of them. Now, let me take this opportunity to mention the 2 or 3 dark points in Mr. Shakurirad's audio recording, which I mentioned earlier, which somewhat reveal the subversive nature of their intentions. There were 3 dark points in this audio recording, aside from the valid point he made that challenged the Islamic Republic's narrative. One is that Mr. Shakurirad, in this audio recording, refers to the magnificent Islamic Revolution. This indicates that these gentlemen still consider the 1979 revolution, which everyone has understood, including children and all Iranians, apart from a small percentage of them, to have caused such a catastrophe and destruction for Iran as a magnificent revolution. The second point is that Mr. Khomeini is remembered with a positive interpretation. Well, Mr. Shakurirad, you who criticized these massacres and challenged the official narrative, don't you know that Mr. Khomeini also issued a fatwa that took the lives of at least 3,000 people in 1 or 2 nights? Why is it that you still do not want to sever your ties with Khomeini and still seem to think that Khomeini was different from Khamenei? No, these two were the same. They were following one path. And my third point is that Mr. Shakurirad insulted Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi in this audio recording. This, honestly, is incomprehensible for me, both from the viewpoint of morality and respectfulness, and also because of his ignorance of the respectful position and acceptance Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has among the people of Iran. Mr. Nasiri, you mentioned the dark points in Ali Shakurirad's statements, but now there is a hypothesis that reformists living abroad are seeking to find a pathway to Western officials with the post-Khamenei era in mind. Do you think this scenario is realistic, and how much can it be considered a tool for internal retributions? I do not dismiss this possibility. In recent months, I have witnessed or heard reports that some former officials of the Islamic Republic were contacting figures abroad whom they believed to be influential or connected to the Crown Prince, trying to establish a point of contact, especially after the 12-day attack on Israel. They were very worried. These types of contacts, reaching out to various people, to my knowledge, have existed in the last 2 or 3 months. This is not unlikely. I even suspect that such actions might have been taken through lobbies like NIAC with some Western governments, with reformists presenting themselves as alternatives or a significant part of the alternative movement. But the question is how successful this scenario can be for the future. You see, the scenario that would bring down Khamenei and then allow those who still feel attached to the 1979 revolution, to Khamenei and to political Islam, to be in a position of power in future Iran is very distant from the reality of Iranian society. It can only be realized in dreams. However, some former officials who are among the reformists may announce their readiness to help the Iranian people establish security after the fall of the Islamic Republic and to assist in the leadership of the Iranian people during the transitional period led by Prince Reza Pahlavi. If someone has such an intention, it can be viewed positively and accepted as a part of those defections that the Crown Prince has always welcomed. However, the continuation of the Islamic Republic, or another version of it, is naive. Now, how the Iranian people will interact with these types of officials in the aftermath of victory and the fall of the regime is a discussion that the Iranian people must have and decide about themselves. I consider this to be somewhat plausible. It is indeed possible, not impossible. Let's move on to another topic, Mr. Nasiri. If we consider the arrests of reformists as a part of a power struggle among the factions within the Islamic Republic, why did the IRGC intelligence service intervene in this way? Is this action more out of a security concern or about eliminating rivals? Let me make one point in response to your previous question, and then I will return to this one. I have a suggestion for Iranian reformists, not the opportunist ones, not those who sometimes pretend they do not want Khamenei and sometimes might talk about his overthrow. My suggestion is that the gentlemen have the opportunity to accept the leadership of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the leader of the transitional period now. You see, this does not mean aligning yourself to one person. It means joining the roaring waves of a nation that has magnificently taken to the streets, a nation that has been shot at in response to pro-Pahlavi slogans, has been slaughtered and has given thousands of martyrs. They can join this river of glory. But, Mr. Nasiri, I don't think anyone else among reformists, apart from Mr. Tajzadeh, who is in prison now, is calling for a transition from the Islamic Republic, at least in words. Now, you see, some of them might sometimes speak of overthrowing in their private conversations, or they might think that now that so many people have been arrested, among them Mr. Asgharzadeh, Mr. Aminzadeh and others, they might be thinking that these were entertaining the idea of overthrowing or were suspected of favoring overthrowing the system. Now, even if they didn't entertain the idea of overthrowing, they could see how close the fall of the Islamic Republic and Khamenei are. They can take a lesson from these events and lighten their burden in the future a bit by joining the roaring waves of the nation. This would be in their favor. Now, back to your question. You see, the reason why the IRGC intelligence has intervened in this matter, I have already partially answered earlier on, so I am repeating myself in a way. All these gestures are within the framework of survival. You see, peace negotiations are carried out in the same way. I saw before our conversation that you were reading some news about these peace negotiations. This is truly a calculated program in the sense that will make the Islamic Republic think it can endure after such negotiations. It can guarantee its survival, and it can come across favorably in the eyes of the US, Europe and Israel. In my opinion, they do not view the issue this way at all. They realize the severity of the situation. You see, they are all obedient to Khamenei, and they're all facing a leader whose decisions today are driven by madness and a lack of any shred of wisdom. Perhaps others besides Khamenei are paying attention to how dire the situation is, and this could lead to his very rapid downfall. However, Khamenei is not in this mindset and instructs them to carry out these theatrical actions in this manner. Mr. Larijani's trip to Oman can also be assessed in this context, and the arrests can also be analyzed in the same way. I now want to tell the people of Iran not to worry about these negotiations and these stories. There is no chance for the survival of the Islamic Republic, and they cannot deceive the world again, deceive America, deceive Europe, especially Israel and Mr. Netanyahu. They cannot deceive them. These efforts and tactics for survival, I don't know, they might have a temporary effect for a month, maybe a few weeks. I really do not see any success for the Islamic Republic in these kinds of actions. So what we are seeing today, Mr. Nasiri, this effort by the factions, you have said that you see no prospect for their survival. Can it be said that it is a kind of preparation for the post-regime era? No. You see, Khamenei does not look at the narrative in this way at all. For Khamenei, thinking about the post-regime era and having plans for when he is not around is not how he operates. I feel that Khamenei is in such a dire psychological state that he might prefer to be killed in a war or to be buried under rubble, to present himself as a martyr to his few supporters, to somewhat alleviate the dire state he is in today. Khamenei does not think about this issue at all. However, some of those other security institutions, as I said before, who may have some evil intelligence, may think that such movements could open a path for them for the future, perhaps to create an alternative to Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi in Iran. They may actually think in this way, but we know that this is an illusion, a fantasy that has no relation to the realities on the ground in Iranian society. After all, look at the statement that Mr. Khatami issued after this massacre, which confirmed Khamenei's narrative. I don't know what dignity is left for the reformist movement after these actions, these thoughts. How can anyone from the security institutions or even those overseas, like their lobbyists in the West, think that the reformists or a branch of the reformists can be a rival to Crown Prince in future Iran, or that they can be a movement that even as a minority has honor and dignity and can assert itself? In my opinion, this is very distant from the reality of the political scene in Iran. You mentioned an interesting point, Mr. Nasiri. One of these reformists, who was previously a member of parliament, described the arrests as a coup. Is the arrest of a few reformists really serious enough to be called a coup? Yes, what can I say? These are sweet delusions they have about themselves. The reformists did not want to accept the popular slogan that I think emerged in 2017, which goes, "Reformists, principalists, it's all over now." The whole story emerged from the people. They did not want to understand or accept this. They do not want to acknowledge the depth of hatred and disgust of a large segment of the people after the election of Pezeshkian, after their stance during the 12-day Israeli attack and standing alongside Khamenei and the Islamic Republic after the position they took over the massacre. They really do not want to understand the level of hatred and disgust towards the reformist movement. They're just happy with their own fantasies. Mr. Nasiri, I want to take advantage of your presence to ask you a couple of questions also regarding Khamenei, since you referred to his troubled mental state. Well, today he gave a televised message where his location was unclear, and many say that the place he was standing looked like a simulation of an Islamic center, the Hosseinieh, where he has spoken many times. On the other hand, his absence or failure to meet with the Air Force commanders yesterday has also made headlines. What do you think his absence from the meeting with the commanders of the ground forces and of the Air Force and his television message are a sign of? Well, the reason is clear. It indicates a feeling of severe danger and insecurity. After the 12-day attack, some people regretted that Khamenei was not killed then. I had my own analysis and interpretation. I said that from one angle, it wasn't a bad thing. It was good that Khamenei survived that 12-day attack, and out of fear and cowardice, he went into hiding and did not dare to come out. Sometimes I really think that on the occasions that he came out, through the negotiation channels they have, they might have secured a guarantee for his safety, so that at some point he might have actually come into his prayer center, and that wasn't just a simulation. This aspect of Khamenei's personality should become clear to the world, to the people, and to his supporters. Khamenei, who during the attack on the Twin Towers belittled George Bush, saying that he was hiding for 3 days when that attack happened, and saying, if it were us, if that attack happened to us, we would have been on the front lines. The emptiness of all of Khamenei's claims has been revealed to the people. This was a significant achievement for the people of Iran and for Iranian society. Khamenei has most certainly no escape. He cannot flee. Why? There is only one way. I think that if he proposes this path himself, the US and Israel might agree, which is to request asylum in Moscow, like his friend Bashar Assad. This might be a way for him to survive, but without a doubt, Khamenei has no chance of survival either during the attack that will happen in Iran or at the hands of the angry people of Iran who are seeking revenge for thousands of precious lives taken from them. I saw that on social media, users were analyzing images that Khamenei's own site had published today, trying to determine where he was. Some users zoomed in on Khamenei's turban, saying that the dust on it shows that he either passed through a place with a low ceiling or had interesting interpretations of the whereabouts of his hideout, just as you mentioned yourself. But today, Khamenei called for participation in February the 11th rally. What goal does this message pursue, given the situation that has arisen? Considering the massacre that took place on the 18th and 19th of January, and this national revolution that continues to progress with great strength. First of all, even last year and the year before, the level of participation in this rally across Iran was very low. It has always been low and has always been exaggerated in the reports. For instance, when they said 3 million had participated, it actually didn't even reach 200,000. We should note that government statistics have always been false. Moreover, that small number was even smaller last year. Many times the national television used images from previous years as images for that year's rally. This year will be much worse. So what should Khamenei do now? This is like a drowning person grasping at any straw, as the Arabic proverb goes, or clutching at straw in English. I want to point out that I think the media should announce that any Iranians who participate in these rallies will have their images recorded. These images will be documented, and in future Iran they will be seen as accomplices to this criminal regime, as those who in some way endorsed these crimes and massacres. This will be recorded in the memory of the Iranian people, and they need to pay attention to the consequences of this. They must be accountable to the Iranian people in the future. Now, even the minority that wants to participate should pay attention to the fact that this will not be without a cost for them. I have another question, because you mentioned that for the first time after the massacre on the 18th and 19th of January, you have come here 10 days later and have honored us by being part of this program. In these protests, there has been much talk about the Islamic Republic bringing in Hashd al-Sha'bi and other foreign forces to massacre the people. Many believe that they have brought in forces from both the Hashd al-Sha'bi and, for example, the Fatemiyun from Afghanistan. Why do you think they brought in such forces? Was the government no longer able to rely on its own forces, or could they not get the job done more easily? This is my last question, and I apologize for keeping you for so long. You see, the presence of foreign forces in this killing, this slaughter, with all the news that has been broadcast and some definitive evidence, is certain. Before this incident, I knew that they had a military base around Karaj called Fatehin, where some of these foreign forces, who had previously fought in Syria, were stationed, mostly perhaps Afghans, and they had prepared them for such days. But I want to say one thing. Let's look at the story a bit more realistically. Let me say this and then I'll get back to that point later. I really want to point out that the army has never been a supporter of the regime in this matter. I can confidently say that over 90% of the police force does not support this regime. There may be some who, out of compulsion, go into the arena at times and confront the people. We have seen in the news of these incidents that in some places the commander of the police had come to explain to the people, either explicitly or implicitly, that they should enter and, for example, take over this space or even to take the weapons. In any case, I want to say that they did not resist this situation. As for the IRGC, I can also confidently say, as I have said before, that certainly about 70% of them are not inclined towards such brutal repression. In such situations, the leadership go after a small section of their zealous supporters, their blind followers, 15, 16-year-old teenagers, and some Iranian thugs. They use them for this repression. What I want to say is that, unfortunately, we can trace the footsteps of a small section of Iranians who have clearly been involved in these repressions and killings. Of course, the people have identified them, and later they will be punished. Unfortunately, they have been there. After all, Khamenei, with all the money he's poured into it, must have been able to persuade 1 or 2% of the population to be with him for such days. We must also pay attention to this issue and look at the scene more realistically. Thank you very much, Mr. Mehdi Nasiri, political activist, who joined us in this news segment.